Welcome all to the Politics of Cinema, the show where, you guessed it, cinema and politics go hand in hand. My name is Aaron Spears.
And my name is Isaac Miller. And on this episode, on this very special Christmas episode, holiday special episode of Politics of Cinema, we will be talking about Gremlins and how it documents the crisis of Reagan's America, and in some ways how it documents the crisis of Trump's America.
Or predicted, maybe?
Yeah, kind of predicted in a way, you know. Well, I mean, part of it is that Trump is such an 80s throwback.
That's true.
I mean, this is sort of, you know, the themes that he goes for sort of fit in.
Yeah. Well, it's true, because wasn't like the whole like "Make America Great Again" is like an old leftover Reagan slogan, isn't it?
I think it actually goes back to...
Or was it like even farther, too?
I think it goes back to the 30s and that more directly fascist element, but I'd have to double check. I can't remember.
I just feel like there was a lot of like Reagan quotes being floated around when he first announced his campaign, and his slogan were like, "Oh God, we're going back to Reagan." I was like, "Well, that's fucking catnip for some Republicans, so that's probably not a bad strategy."
Well, but ultimately, Trump is like a break with sort of what Reaganism created out of the Republican Party, and well, it's really complicated.
Well, right, because there's no inherent ideology to him other than, you know, me.
And sort of instinctive white nationalism.
Right. That's all there too. But so I guess there's a little bit of an upfront idea of doing a holiday episode. I will say, kind of on the back end, I was trying to brainstorm and come up with some sort of like bullshit Hallmark movie approach to doing a Politics of Cinema, but they all kind of celebrate the same thing, and they're not differentiated from each other, and that it's always like someone from the city has to go back to their like small town Americana, if not country roots, and rediscover the meaning of Christmas and blah blah. And I was like, I don't care. I find it weird that like a lot of movie podcasts I listen to and a lot of, I guess, quote unquote good liberals online are like just love a great bad Hallmark movie. But to me, it seems like it kind of like it's celebrating. I mean, we kind of mentioned it earlier with Happiest Season on our previous episode, very briefly, about how like isn't that all just kind of like a celebration of this like fantasy Trump world, small town America that everybody that would be part of that good liberal crowd probably voted against? I was like, I'm all for a good bad movie, but just like the holiday ones, I'm just like, I don't know.
Well, but
I can't do it.
They're doing this stuff ironically and also still enjoying it. I mean, look, we're doing the same thing. What is this movie about?
No, we're not talking about a Hallmark movie.
But I mean, we are talking about a movie set in a small town that in some ways much more directly confronts the issues that lead to sort of a potential Trumpian base. If we believe sort of the demographic analysis of the Trumpian base, which it should be pointed out, and I think this is a really good point that Mike Davis made in his now, I think, traditional election breakdown in New Left Review, pointing out that a lot of... So everybody talks about the suburbs, right? And they talk about small towns. They don't talk about exurbia. But the reality is the first sort of like the older suburbs and exurbia are actually pretty different. And exurbia has absorbed a lot of the smaller towns. That's actually a lot of what you're dealing with. Is sort of the demographics of like the next wave out of suburbs.
Could you define exurbia real quick? I don't think I've ever heard that term before. Like, is it the middle ground between like the large urban centers and suburbia?
No, it's not the middle ground. It's farther out.
Farther out from suburbia.
Yeah, it's the farther out. I mean, it's the farthest out suburbs. It's where all the McMansions are, basically.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's
gotcha.
McMansion.
So it's commutable to the large urban centers, but not out into the country yet.
Yeah, or it's absorbed the country, right?
Okay.
So
no, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so this is where a lot of sort of the wealthier people have moved out to. I mean, it's
right. Yeah, no, that makes sense though, because you have the space to build your McMansions and have your own little personal fortress that you don't want anybody like Gremlins to be invading your area, and you can have your own little fiefdom.
Ooh, was that a preview of analysis?
Maybe there. Well, I wanted to ask you too at the top, because there's apparently I dipped my toe into reading some of this stuff this year because within my household, like my partner, she does not consider Die Hard to be a Christmas movie. I do. And I only watched Gremlins for the first time a couple of years back. And I was like, "Oh, it's such a weird Christmas movie," and they were like, "Wait, is this a Christmas movie?" He's like, "Yeah, it's set at Christmas." Like my standards for Christmas movies are, it's set at Christmas, that's a Christmas movie. I don't really care if it's like about Christmas overtly or not. It's the setting.
I mean, this movie is more aggressively about Christmas than Die Hard.
Well, that's true. But I mean, I've just watched Die Hard as a Christmas movie for years, and I
Yeah.
never gave a second thought to like, is it or isn't? I was like, yeah, it is. I always watch it at Christmas. It's set at Christmas. It's a Christmas movie. Oh, did you see John McTiernan actually was interviewed? I think it was by the AFI about Die Hard being a Christmas movie or not.
Yeah.
Did you see his? He had a special quote, a special note for authoritarians this holiday season.
No, I didn't. I didn't know.
Oh, I'm so happy to get to share this with you. So he said,
So my hope at Christmas this year is that you will all remember that authoritarians are low status angry men who have gone to rich people and said, if you give us power, we'll make sure nobody takes your stuff. And that's the essence of authoritarianism. And that's always been the essence of it. And their obsession with guns and boots and uniforms and squad cars and all that stuff, all those things are the mass of power, meant to scare us, meant to shut us up so we don't kick them to the side of the road and the decent people of the world get on with building the future. Merry Christmas, and I hope we have a better year. Good night.
Wow, that's pretty good.
it's really good, and it makes you want to go watch Die Hard again with that thought in mind, because those were the thoughts in his mind when he was making Die Hard.
I mean, yeah, though admittedly Die Hard is also the movie where one of the subplots is a cop learning to regain his confidence after shooting a kid, but it was the 80s.
True. And how does he regain that confidence? By shooting a foreign terrorist.
I mean, you know, they're German. It's
Actually, I think it's specifically like West German. Like they don't have a political ideology to them, but apparently, as I've read too much about Die Hard this season, because again, I wasn't aware this was a debate until this year, and I started reading more and more about Die Hard and whatnot, and how they were originally supposed to be leftist terrorists, I guess, assaulting Christmas, like literally almost like a war on Christmas was the original Joe Silver pitch, I guess. Even though it's based on a book, which has its own kind of mythos and ideology going. But anyway,
I mean, I always assumed that they were somehow supposed to be kind of leftist, except that they're actually just thieves. They don't really believe in any of this shit. Because what they are, I mean, if you're dealing with West Germans in the 80s, this is really a throwback to like 70s and like Beider Meinhof, and that's what they're playing with. So, you know, I mean, here's the thing about, like, yeah, Die Hard, the Christmas movie. Also, every single movie written or directed by Shane Black.
That's true.
Or nearly every single one.
Upwards of 90% at least.
I mean, I guess, you know, Lethal Weapon, which was a real franchise, and I feel like just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't get talked about as much. I like the first one. It's deeply reactionary, but whatever.
I think I watched one. I don't know if I ever watched one, actually. I remember watching 2 and 3. I don't know. I never had the Mel Gibson itch, and then once he came out as being like the true Mel Gibson that he is, I was like, okay, I'm already done with this guy anyway, so fuck it.
The first, I mean, I think the first one is a lot better than the later ones, and it's a Christmas movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's no question of that, and I think it's sort of interesting pairing that up. I mean, I don't know if Predator is a Christmas movie. You wouldn't really know. I guess that involves Shane Black.
I don't think of it as one, but
you know,
mean, you could always watch it at Christmas.
But you can go through his whole catalog and everything is at Christmas.
Kiss Bang Bang.
The Nice Guys is Iron Man 3. Iron Man 3 is a Christmas movie.
Oh, I never watched that one.
Anyway, that is actually one of the more politically interesting Marvel movies. So anyway, let's talk about the Christmas movie that we're talking about today.
Gremlins.
Speaking of small town America,
Steven Spielberg presents Gremlins. Billy Pelser has a nice home.
Billy, is that you?
Yeah, Mom, it's me.
A nice job. A nice girl.
If you're not doing anything this Thursday night, maybe you'd like to go out on a date with me?
I'd love to.
And loving parents who are about to give him...
You're gonna like this. No, don't shake it. We're gonna have to open it now. It won't wait till Christmas.
the most unusual gift he ever got.
What is it?
It's your new pet.
Come on, Barney, be a good dog. My dad gave it to me.
But there are a few things to keep in mind. If you expose it to the light, you may hurt it. If you get it wet, it will multiply.
All that from water? They got wet?
Yeah, plain water.
And most important, no matter how much they beg, never, never let them eat after midnight. Because when they do, they change. They become clever, mischievous,
What's going on here?
and dangerous.
Gremlins, huh? Little monsters.
Right.
Hundreds of them.
Well, I don't know, maybe thousands.
They've been here too. Billy, what are these things? Where did they come from?
Look, I know it sounds crazy, I know. But in a few hours, you're gonna have a major disaster on your hands.
Gremlins, directed by Joe Dante. They'll be expecting you.
So did you grow up with this movie?
I watched it first in middle school at a sleepover, which is exactly where you should first watch Gremlins.
Exactly when you should watch this one for sure. To reference a line in Gremlins, I only first watched this movie a few years ago, and a good buddy of mine from film school, or still current friend, but I met him in film school. He constantly gave me shit because I never watched Goonies or Gremlins growing up. And I find it interesting that in Gremlins, the movie, there's a social status that's commented on because one character has cable television.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up for most of my my youth. I think we got cable when I was like a junior, maybe in high school, which wasn't necessarily an economic thing. I think my parents just didn't want, I don't know, more TV watching in the house. I grew up with what my buddy and I always joke with is the HBO gap, where like he watched all this crap on HBO. Sorry, he watched all these films on HBO, and I didn't, except for the free HBO weekends. I did obsessively record everything on that weekend. But Goonies and Gremlins weren't in there, and I just watched Gremlins and Goonies roughly back to back over the same weekend a couple of years ago. So I didn't come to it with the nostalgia, but I still find it very fascinating.
It's very fascinating. I think it's an incredibly class conscious film, and I think that is one of the, like, all these little things in there. It's not an accident. It's very much a movie. So I think the key reference point for understanding this is it's a Wonderful Life, because that is where this is set. This is set in a small town. It's a Wonderful Life, but it is the 80s now. And the other thing that has gotten a lot of attention in recent years, I think I was aware of it with Dear White People in 2014, where there's a short analysis of the film in Dear White People, the movie, arguing that the Gremlins are basically black people, or that it's analogous. I think
I did not remember that scene. I mean, in Dear White People, that scene.
I believe that's where it is. I could have, but I know
I trust your memory. I just don't remember that part.
I wouldn't trust my memory on that. But basically, I mean, I think that as analysis, there's certainly something there. I'm not sure that that's the strongest thrust, because I think, part of it is they're doing, it's like there's breakdancing, there's all sorts of things, but the Gremlins do everything.
Well, I was going to say, I buy that analysis because I wrote in we'll get to that when we get to the bar scene, but like I did write at one point in my notes, it was like, is this movie racist? ? But we'll get to that once we get, so we're going to go through it in chronological order here in bullet points, but I'll mention it when we get there. But there's definitely, I think, a scene that supports that idea.
Yeah,
I don't know if the whole thing does.
I think there's at least one scene. I don't know if it's, but I think the stronger argument was, I think for me at least, it's not that you have to verse these things. Movies don't work that way. It can be all these things at once. But Wendy Allison Lee, Public Books in 2019, wrote an article called "Cute, Dangerous Asian Americans, Gremlins." At 35.
That's a great title.
Gremlins at 35. And so she's making an argument that this movie is very much dealing with the creation of the model minority myth around Asian Americans, specifically East Asians, and so forth. I would like to push this in our discussion here more toward, it probably is a little early for the Japan panic, but I'm not sure. But certainly within the sort of crisis of confidence. I mean, the Reagan era is an era where America gets its confidence back, but there's a crisis of confidence as well, as sort of American capitalism or at least people's perception of American capitalism is put under pressure. And the small town arena, which is sort of the base of sort of the Trumpness that we sort of know now, or at least the way it stereotypes, is the arena in which this is played out. And also, there's also a lot of direct, actually, in the movie, Asian stereotypes and so forth that would be very normal in the 80s. And we should mention all of that. I think it's all there.
It's also then Goonies as well, since I was just talking about watching Gremlins and Goonies relatively close together a couple of years ago.
It's something you can do in the 80s because you've moved past.
It's around the Spielberg film universe of the mid 80s here.
Well,
early to mid 80s.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing where you've moved past the yellow peril to a large degree. So it's either karate or mystical wise men or smart kids.
Well, I think the perfect way to jump in then is I got a few bullet points here as I go through the general plot of Gremlins to get your reactions to, and a few of my reactions as well. But it starts off with a struggling inventor, Rand, the dad of the family here. He visits Chinatown antique store while he's in the big bad city for a convention, an inventors convention, trying to sell his latest mobile shaving travel kit invention he's got. And he's trying to find the perfect present for his son, Billy. And that's when he runs into Mr. Wing, who runs a little, I don't know, curiosity shop, I guess, in Chinatown, and buys a Mogwai.
Which apparently is Cantonese for devil.
Oh, really?
According to Wikipedia.
Okay, well, we'll say that with a grain of salt then. He learns the 3 rules. Of course, Mr. Wing does not want to sell him the Mogwai ever, but his enterprising grandson's like, yeah, I don't give a shit. I'll, meet me in the back alley and I'll sell it to you. And he takes it home, gives it to his son. And this is when we arrive at Kingston Falls. This is the picturesque, I was going to say like Norman Rockwellian kind of town, but I think you're right. It's the Capra small town.
Yeah, no, I think that is really what's going on here, including, the theme around the local bank mogul, basically the local, who owns everybody's house, right? Mrs. What's her name?
Deagle.
Mrs. Deagle, who seems to both own everybody's houses, controls the local bank, and is exploiting the hell out of everybody, which, in the 40s is a theme that you could play with, but in the 80s is like, well, this is right after, or maybe they're not even outside of the Reagan recession that's set off by like, the Volcker shock, the rise in interest rates caused by the Fed to get 70s inflation under control, which was up until that point the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. We're now like 2 out from that.
I was going to say, and we're not that old either, and we've been alive for both of them.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So I think you're setting, here you have a struggling inventor, right? Very much sort of I think the classical American. He's sort of there's something classically American about sort of the small time innovation, right? That's supposed to make it good, except that he's not very good at it.
Well, it's also it's this weird hallmark of Spielberg stuff too, because it's in Back to the Future, it's in Goonies, it's in Batteries. Like he's like this interesting gadgetry obsession with like having some sort of an inventor character in a lot of these movies.
Right. Yeah, I think
I don't know what that means, but it's around in a lot of his stuff.
Yeah, I think it is. And then, but like you just get this very quick portrait of a place that's struggling. Like these are all our main characters. Phoebe Cates' character. I don't know if she has another job, but she works at the bar for free, basically, because it's the community hangout bar, and they need the help.
Doesn't she work with him at the bank too?
Oh,
no, I'm not sure. I thought she had the 2. I thought I had her in my notes as like doing 2 jobs.
She might. So she might already be working, but either way, it's like either way tells you like she's working at the bar for free, like to keep the bar open, I guess.
Yeah. And living at home, I believe, same as our protagonist here, Billy, who's still living at home.
Right. She's living at home. He's living at home. They're both sort of like trying to figure out what they're going to do. The family like clearly doesn't have a lot of cash. They're under economic pressure from a landlady who also wants to kill their dog.
Yeah. A dog which he brings with him to work at the bank.
Which yeah. And then Murray Futterman, played by the great Dick Miller, oftentimes known for being older, sort of right-wing cranks in movies, who was such, I guess, must have been such a hit in this movie because he shows up in the second one too.
Oh,
Uh,
that's right.
yeah. So, but who I guess is what, a World War II vet who's constantly so this is where you sort of get the sense of the Japan panic early on, because for him, and this is also fitting sort of within the sort of the Trumpian frame, or what would become the Trumpian frame, is the constant worry about foreign invasions, which of course is Asian competition basically to American products and our
Mhm.
manufacturing collapse, which is of course what the Gremlins are too, right?
Right.
Um, in a lot of ways. So he's sort of like your crazy conspiracy theory neighbor, who's sort of cute in this movie and is not now. Um, because what Murray Futterman would be now would be terrifying. I mean,
Right.
he wasn't really cute then either. But
But it's
like,
played as like a comic relief, goofy neighbor character.
yeah, he's well, he's ran into the Gremlins in World War II, or so he thinks. I mean, but part of it is he's another sign of the economic pressures that everyone's under.
Right.
I mean, the xenophobia that he's showing is reflective of probably a real perception,
Mhm.
not a real reality of everything America. But like, so like, just the place setting of this movie is really interesting.
I'm saying this is all like the first like opening bit right after the credits. This is all just like the intro, setting the stage, giving us a sense of the world that they're all living in. It's interesting that it's done in like there's snow falling. We know it's around the holidays because of the Christmas music, the Christmas decorations. Sorry, not necessarily the music, but like the decorations. The music, the score in this film, early Jerry Goldsmith score. It's light and it's vaguely happy. Like this isn't. This would be very different if this was like a John Cassavetes movies about like the effects of the economic recession on small town America. It'd be a very different tone. Like it's done. It's a very light, breezy tone. You're like, wait, but when you think about it, you're like, wait. This town's in some dire straits right now.
Yeah,
This is not a happy story.
everything's a mess.
Right.
Um,
I think at one point, Kate, the Phoebe Cates character, even mentions like the suicide rate around like the holidays and how on edge the town is. And you're like, whoa! I thought this was like a PG, Spielberg family friendly holiday movie.
well, part of it is, I mean, it's a horror comedy. It's a family horror comedy, but what they're doing is I think there's a satire of I mean, I think they are they're doing a dark mirrored version, but also maybe one that's very real to actual economic conditions of small towns.
Mhm.
Like, so they're playing with that all American small town thing, the thing that we see still in Hallmark movies, and kind of getting at actually what the state of things are.
Right? No, I'm saying it's not inaccurate. It's just it's the tone when you stop to think about it is like, oh, like I was watching this with a couple kids who were like 8 and 6 at the time. And they're just like, oh, it's cool effects and the creature feature aspect to it and the thrill to it. But it was like, wait a minute, there's some really weird shit going on here.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
Yeah.
I mean, especially not to jump really far ahead, and spoilers for one of the running gags of the film, one of the key running gags of the film, but Phoebe Cates' character's reason why she hates Christmas, which is that her father dressed as Santa Claus and got trapped in a chimney and died
Died.
there. Yeah, which is of course
Yeah.
is a joke, right? It's a good joke.
It's definitely yeah, it's a rated R black comedy kind of joke. Right, but it's really weird though because it's not played for like laughs or satire or comedy. It's like it's a really like sobering moment in a comedic creature feature movie.
Right.
But also you don't really, as an adult watching, like you don't really even blink an eye as that scene goes by, because I think Joe Dante is really quite the craftsman at balancing these wild tones. Because like as we're describing it, like this shouldn't make any sense.
Of Joe Dante's movies that I've seen, and I've seen a decent number, this is by far the best, I think. I mean, I like this considerably more than The Howling. I haven't watched Small Soldiers since I was a kid. I actually think The Burbs, which is another interesting commentary
Oh,
on
jeez.
some of
Yeah.
these things, but I don't actually think The Burbs works terribly well. I think it's got some issues.
I've seen very few of his movies actually. I just recently watched Hollywood Boulevard, which I love. It's a great comedy way before he did Gremlins, but um I like his opinion. I consume his opinions and thoughts on film a lot more than I've watched his films. To put it that way, I guess.
Yes.
But anyway, we need to get. Do you want to get into the actual creature part of the creature feature here, the Mogwai, the Gremlins?
Yeah, let's do it.
Inexplicably, Billy, our protagonist here, is, I guess, good friends. Maybe is he a neighbor of Pete, Corey Feldman, who
Yeah.
is like 10 years old, 10 years younger than him in this movie? I was like, why are you two hanging out together? It's the same maternal question I have for Back to the Future. Why is Marty McFly friends with an elderly, crazy, wild-eyed inventor in the town, and not someone more his own age?
Well, I think it's like, I mean, it's not like they're not peer friends. He's the neighborhood kid.
The neighborhood kid, yeah. So he's the one who accidentally spills water on Gizmo, the main Mogwai that we start off with, and we get 5 more Mogwai spawn from his back in true, awesome creature feature gore. Well, not really gore, I guess, but like the effects are great. Like these are amazing practical effects that you could just tell Joe Dante revels in, kind of the creature features of his childhood that he gets to now recreate on screen with Gremlins.
Right. No, I mean, I think, part of it is, I mean, one, Gizmo was designed to be a toy. And
oh, for sure.
In the article in Cute, Dangerous Asian American, I mean, they point out a part of Wendy, Allison Lee's analysis is that, Gizmo is that model minority, right? He's cute, he's smart, he's all of these things until he becomes a monster that tries to swallow you.
Yeah.
And I think, there's something to that, but he's, oh my gosh, yeah, he's too much.
Yeah. Well, also, I found it interesting that as soon as, like, this isn't one of those things where, like, Billy's trying to, like, hide this from his parents or this can't get out or whatever. Like, he shows his parents, his dad specifically, and his dad's first thought, being an inventor who hasn't quite made it yet financially, was just like, let's exploit this. We can sell these things for money.
Yeah. Well, part of it is, so there's another theme going on with the Mogwai and this sort of Asianness, right? Which is, so you have the wise old man stereotype, the wise sage stereotype. And part of what's going on is, the Mogwai are nature that literally at the end of the movie, they're talking about this, that the old man comes to collect them after we've contained the Gremlins outbreak. And is literally saying, Western man who's, too profit seeking or whatever, is not yet ready to take care of, is not ready to be a, basically take care of nature.
You've done with Mogwai what you've done with all of nature's gifts. You are not ready.
Is that the literal quote? Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, part of what's going on there is that, I actually, I got this from my friend Laura today because we were talking about it. There's some noble savaging going on there, if you know the trope. He's used as the foil for Western society, environmental things in which he is sort of naturalized, right? He's made part of nature, or at least able to deal with nature because of his, he's not part of modernity, right?
Right.
Which is an interesting juxtaposition with the both World War II resentment and technological pressure put on by sort of like Chinese products in the film. And then sort of like your Asian American stuff as well. You've got multiple different interpretations of what Asian means in like 80s, in the sort of flux of 80s culture right there.
Right there within...
Right within this one movie.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I mean, you can think of like 3 different strands going into what this is. And I think the collective of like, this is an era in which you can sort of have Asian characters and so forth, but they have to be contained. And it's, I don't know. I think that's what part of what gives the movie its depth.
Well, also, yeah, because it's not all specifically one thing. Like there's that read on it, but then, as mentioned earlier, once there's more actual transformed gremlins out there, and there's literally like a horde, an army of them running rampant around the town, killing people left and right as well. There's a scene where, for I don't know, reasons unbeknownst to me, I was like laughing out loud first watching this. Kate is serving gremlins alcohol in the bar, which, as you point out, she's not even getting paid to work at this point, as if they're just regular customers trying to maintain order. it's one of the most bonkers scenes. I'm completely ignoring Gremlins 2 for this conversation, but like this is one of the most bonkers scenes in this first movie. I thought the first time through, because you're like, why are you serving them alcohol? Why are you trying to keep this establishment going with them? Like, get the fuck out. Eventually she grabs a camera because light is one of the things you're supposed to keep them away from. So when the flash goes off, they all start to cringe. But this is the scene where I wrote down like, I is this movie racist?
Oh, in terms of, so this is the Dear White People analysis.
Yeah. So like within the scene, within the bar, again, she's serving them all alcohol, so obviously it's exacerbating their behavior because it's alcohol, it's an intoxicant. It even works on Gremlins. They're in the bar, they're eating fried chicken, they're breakdancing, they're wearing shades, they've got like the cabbie hat, the kind of those Kangol hats on, and at one point they're playing dice.
Well, they also do a jazz musician thing.
Right, and there's jazz, like it's these weird tropes where I was like, "Are you signaling? Is this what is going on here?" It was kind of one of those like, "Wait, what is going on here?"
I mean,
Because there's a bunch of other things you could have shown in that scene that you don't see. That could just be like I mean, it could be like a parable for just like drunken frat boys at a certain point, but it's not. It's very specific. The little cultural signifiers that it's showing the Gremlins doing within the bar.
you know, part of it is the Gremlins are cartoon characters, right? I mean, they're not literally, they're puppets, but they act as cartoon characters.
Right.
The things that they do are like cartoon level. So they do all sorts of parodies and weird things.
Right.
And not all of those fit within those stereotypes.
Well, that's why I wrote, "Is it racist?" Question mark. It wasn't like oh, this definitely is. Because like, yeah, they clearly embody like all of like the sin, vice, whatever, those impulses, I guess.
Well, I mean, I think we've already demonstrated the movie is both commenting on racial issues, is playing into some of them directly and explicitly, and I don't think it's particularly. I don't think it'd be controversial to say that. I guess I would have to look a little more closely about whether those particular stereotypes are part of them just literally just acting like people all over the place, or whether. But as you point out, they're concentrated in a particular scene and a particular moment.
Right. That's what just kind of gave me a red
Yeah.
flag. I was like, wait a minute.
Right. Because if they're just randomly doing those things, that would just be the Gremlins as sort of like weird cultural, like playing off of human culture in general.
Right.
And they do that, but
but it's all together in one montage. It's kind of weird.
Yeah,
I don't know. It struck my eyes as kind of weird right now.
Oh, it's definitely. I mean, I think it does. I mean, well, part of it is. I mean, notice, what Gizmo does the same thing, right? He's deeply influenced by popular culture, but he's influenced by like Rambo and like Clark Gable movies.
Right.
So, much more wholesome to sort of like mainstream middle class white America.
Yeah, the only thing that would have been better was if he was watching. They're not watching "It's a Wonderful Life" in this movie, are they? On any point in the background or on a TV or something?
I think so. I mean, it's it's haunted by "It's a Wonderful Life." That's definitely there.
Right. I just didn't know if it was actually present within the film, but it's definitely there. I don't know if it's just there in the movie because I heard somebody, some comedian recently was saying about how like, I've never seen "It's a Wonderful Life," but I'm pretty sure I got the whole thing because there's been so many clips of "It's a Wonderful Life" played in all the Christmas movies I've watched over the years.
Right.
So secondhand, "It's a Wonderful Life." But anyway, yeah. So they, they're successful. They fight back the hordes of gremlins, and as you said at the end, a day late, I guess, but Mr. Wing ends up arriving, in small town white America in this case, except for the science teacher. We have one person of color in this cast who's killed then also. Mr. Wing shows up and says the whole, "You've done with Mogwai what you've done with all of nature's gifts. You are not ready," which, luckily they didn't give him another week because the dad was clearly ready to start marketing this as the new pet craze. And it would have been the end for that if those were distributed.
This would have been a zombie apocalypse level disaster.
Oh my God, it would have been. Oh, then we would have had a great George Romero sequel.
Oh my gosh.
Gremlins 2 would have been so different.
See, that's the thing is you just need to have a Gremlins movie where they're not contained.
Right. Yeah, you should have let him go at the end, but that's not a very happy ending. Instead, we get Mr. Wing just literally walking through small town America in the snow on Christmas Day then, I guess.
Right.
Heading back with Gizmo.
Yeah.
Fucking weird movie.
So there's the thing though is we're not going to. But we could lay into all of these themes even more. You have so many racial and political and class themes that are so out in the open. Some of them explicit, some of them not. You have amazing special effects. You have, I mean, you have, really, a tone and a almost a satirical view at small town America.
Yeah.
There's so much going on in this movie.
It's weird. It's one of those that that's one of the reasons I love the premise for the show, obviously, because we're, doing the show, that gets me watching movies with very different eyes than I would normally just put on passively, a traditional, oh, that's a Christmas movie, let's give this a watch. And we're like, wait a minute. What is going on here?
Right.
Because these movies aren't made in a vacuum. Like it's accidentally or on purpose. This movie, I think, on purpose, is capturing a particular moment that includes fears and hopes and anxieties and everything else within the culture that produced this film, which is early mid 80s Hollywood, and incorporates that into the creature feature that Joe Dante was clearly interested in making, and the type of film that Spielberg, was making his brand at the time this movie came out.
Right.
Very interesting.
So I'd make an argument. If you're looking for your off-kilter Christmas movie, I know everybody goes for Die Hard these days, and we have that discussion. But I actually think I think this is a better one, because I think it's a synthesis of a lot of your elements of your classic Christmas movie. That mistake
That's a
is
tongue
stay in
twister.
there. And classic Christmas movie at the same time that it is taking them in a direction that involves little monsters trying to kill you at random.
Yeah.
And then watching Snow White in a theater. It's
that's right. Then they do the whole Inglourious Bastards. Let's lock them all in the theater and set it on fire.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's great. I mean,
yeah.
So like, I think this, for me at least, this is this is my go-to like off-brand Christmas movie.
Yeah, solid pick.
I just as we're wrapping up, I think there was an element of Reagan era critique. I mean, we mentioned the Reagan recession. We mentioned sort of, I guess, we mentioned elements of this sort of the pressure, the economic pressure that people are under. But actually, this movie jumps straight in, and the small town culture under pressure. Mm-hmm. I think this movie jumps on. There's an element that is missed, which is the guy at the bank who is over our hero, right? Who is his age, but like moving on up.
Oh, Judge Reinhold.
Judge Reinhold's character,
yeah,
is a total greed is good guy, right? And I think you pointed this out before recording. It's like his status symbol is that he has cable, and he's trying to hook up with Phoebe Cates by saying, "Come over and watch cable."
Right. And he's going places. He's ready for advancement within the corporate structure of a bank.
Right. He's ready for, he's ready for that, and he's making fun of them, and he's pushing on her working for free, as part of her doing this as part of the community.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And he's saying how silly that is. So I think the element that we mention all the sort of Reagan backdrop, but it's clear. I think just to be clear, it is a critique of those things.
Right.
I just want to make sure, it's like, this is a movie that is critiquing sort of the greed and good of Reagan's America and the pressure on that sort of the neoliberal transition is putting on traditional life. So I think, quote unquote, traditional life.
Right.
So I just wanted to make sure that was, I feel like we didn't quite press on that enough.
Right. We brought up all the elements, but didn't really mention what the commentary itself was, which is a critique. It's a satire.
Yeah, it's a satire.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we were like highlighting. Here's all the flags here, but what does that mean? Oh, it means it's a critique. It's a satire. Which again, like it also, we're not saying like, oh, this movie sucks, whatever. I was like, it's actually wildly interesting. And again, it's sort of, no, actually, I enjoy this movie more than RoboCop. But the way we were saying with RoboCop, or personally for me, Conan the Barbarian, where I think the politics of the film make it infinitely more interesting than just it as a standalone film.
Yeah.
And I think this one is another one of those cases where like it works perfectly fine as like a holiday movie you could watch and, get all sentimental about or whatever. And there's the creature feature, and there's the adorable, the toyetic nature of Gizmo. There's the small town America kind of vibe there, but there's also this much more really interesting, deeper political ideology and critique that's going on within the film itself, if you care to look, which is so weird to me because you could easily just watch this. I mentioned to a few other people that had seen it that I was like, yeah, the political angle is really weird. Like, what are you talking about? And you mentioned a few things to a couple of coworkers actually, and they're like, oh my God, that is in there, isn't it?
Well, what's interesting about it, yeah.
Yeah, it's just so weird that you could passively just take this in and just be like, oh yeah, that's that cool creature feature, family movie.
Well, that's just it. People don't notice it until it's pointed out. But unlike a
But it's
lot,
there.
it's really there, and it's not that unsurface, which
Right.
means that when you point it out to people, they get it pretty quick. It's not a movie where you
Yeah.
have to work hard to go like, yeah, but it's like, look, it's right there.
Yeah. But it's not like the front facing part of the story.
Yes.
So it's there as like the world building if you care to notice it, which is I think that's the beauty of the show.
Yeah.
We're helping you notice some of these things.
I mean, actually, the one thing I would say is that the sort of almost noble savage nature versus the Asian nature versus Western materialism narrative is actually core, or it like flows through it. But yeah, that is the beauty of the show. We're just bringing this out.
Well, it's also like the explicitly stated almost last line of the movie. Like it's the thought that the movie leaves you with.
Right.
Everybody was like, I need to buy a gizmo for my kid because it's adorable little toy. You're like, whoa, hold on. Did you catch that last line?
Well, so it's a critique of Western capitalism through Orientalism, basically.
Right. Well, we will be back shortly with a non-holiday episode. This is one of those like deviations, a very special holiday edition of the Politics of Cinema. Good for only 1 week. Otherwise, I'm not sure who's gonna be looking for a Christmas or a holiday episode, once we get into mid-January, unless you're just a big Gremlins fan, which is perfectly reasonable. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming shortly. So until then, if you are liking the show, please feel free to rate and review the show in whatever podcast app you are using. And if you do enjoy the show, tell a friend or two or three. We're also up and running on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Letterboxd, the usual social media platforms. So give us a like and a follow there. So until next time, when we resume our regularly scheduled broadcasts, I am Aaron Spears.
And I'm Isaac Miller. And, stay safe out there. Because if you're somewhere where there is still actually winter, which, obviously in our global warming hellscape, or increasingly hellscape, like right now, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, and there is no ice. But, stay safe. Don't trip on anything.